And now it's my pleasure to introduce our first panel, and I'm going to introduce the moderator. So that's my role. It's my pleasure to introduce Ben, who's my colleague and friend. He is the William J. Loschert Endowed Chair of Entrepreneurship and Professor and Area Chair of Strategy and Statistics here at the Gabelli School. Ben is an excellent teacher and was recently recognized as one of the top 50 undergraduate business school professors by Poets and Quants. But he's also an outstanding researcher who has a deep interest in how blockchain will be disrupting industries and creating new ones altogether. And because of his thought leadership in this area, Ben was recently named a fellow of the British Blockchain Association. So I will turn it over to my colleague and friend, Ben.
Thanks, Layers on. Appreciate it. So I'd first like to introduce our panelists so everyone knows who we are congratulating today. First is Buffy Swineheart. She's the Senior Manager, Corporate Social Responsibility at Aflac. Buffy, if you could wave so that everyone knows where you are in this group. Okay, wonderful. Second is Brian Kiser, Automotive Training Professional at Toyota. Hi, Brian. Next comes Pam Piligian. She is the Senior Vice President, Marketing and Communications at Navy Federal Credit Union. And finally, Myles Worthington, who is Head of Global Audiences, Brand and Editorial Marketing at Netflix. So first, congratulations. It's wonderful to have you all here. As we heard earlier, the AII is based on perceptions from customers. I mean, what this means is that people who are already giving you money, right, actually want you to be praised publicly for what you've been doing. So not only is that amazing, it reminded me personally of one of my favorite sayings. So there is a professional dancer, now a ubiquitous judge on a lot of these competition shows. His name is Derek Huff, and he has this quote that goes, "People are rewarded in public for what they practice in private," right? So that means that a lot of things behind the scenes had to happen in order to achieve innovations sufficient to register for customers in the AII. Managers made decisions about resource allocation. They created roles and responsibilities. They might have instituted some new incentive structures, empowered people in interesting ways, shifted deadlines, and various other things in order to achieve the innovation that you're being recognized for. So first, I'd like for you to tell us about what you believe is your key innovation for your firm. And if you could also share a little bit about what happened behind the scenes to make those innovations a reality, that would be amazing. So let's go ahead and start with Buffy.
Thank you so much, Ben. And it's a pleasure to be here today representing Aflac. Many of you may know of the Aflac duck. And he's actually part of our innovation story that I wanted to share with you today. You may not be aware of Aflac's focus on childhood cancer, though. That is our chief philanthropic focus, and I'm proud to say our company has given more than $155 million to the cause. And so you may be wondering why an insurance company is here for social innovation. And the great news is we actually used our brand mascot, the Aflac duck, as part of our innovation to bring attention on our chief philanthropic focus of childhood cancer. So in 2018, we really wanted to leverage technology to help children with cancer. And we really wanted to figure out a way to have more of a national reach with our program, to get more people talking about childhood cancer and the great need for funding there. And so we worked with a company called Sproutel, who is also a very innovative company. They actually design medical toys for children with various diseases. So they had created a bear for children with diabetes. And so we approached them to help us take our duck and use that to help children with cancer. And so in 2018, My Special Aflac was hatched, and it is a social robot for children with cancer. It enables children to better express their feelings to their nurses, their caregivers, their families. And it was actually recognized by Time Magazine as one of the best inventions of 2018. We also took Best in Show at the Consumer Electronics Show, which is where we debuted our My Special Aflac duck A lot of people were wondering what in the world Aflac was doing at the Consumer Electronics Show. And I think we were the only item there that was not for sale. So it truly is a donation on Aflac's part. And I think one of the things that has been most meaningful to me personally, besides the wonderful recognition and awards, it's much more rewarding to me to see the difference it's making in the lives of now over 12,000 children across the United States, Japan, and in Northern Ireland most recently that have received a My Special App. But we didn't want to stop there. So in 2020 and this year, we really have broadened to include blood disorders as part of our focus, and specifically sickle cell. For many of you, you may not be familiar with sickle cell, but it mainly affects children of color. And so we are actually taking the duck, further adapting the duck to meet the needs of children with sickle cell. And it wouldn't have been possible without Aflac making a long-term investment in this program and working with great partners. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much. So Brian.
Yes, thanks, Ben, and thank you, Donna and Lerzan and the Gabelli School of Business for this honor. I think I'll start by talking a little bit about how innovation is supported by our guiding principles at Toyota. We call it the Toyota way. It's the foundation of our corporate culture, and it's really the thing that helps us to ensure that we continue to be relevant and drive values for our customer. The Toyota way is built on two pillars. One is respect for people. The other one is continuous improvement, or Kaizen, as you may know it. And this is really the one that challenges us to find a better way of doing something literally every single day. And it's a lot of those little small improvements that Michael was referring to in his keynote. I think his grandmother would make a great Toyota employee, but that's where a lot of our innovation happens. I would say a majority of our innovation is in those small changes that help benefit our company, our vehicles, and ultimately our communities. So a couple of areas where we have been innovating and continue to innovate are safety and connected technology. So I think those are two areas that customers recognize. There have been really dramatic improvements in vehicle technology for safety, and also the ability to have the vehicle connected to their everyday lives. One more example of innovation that's on a slightly larger scale. If you look behind me in my background, I have a picture of Toyota's prototype city of the future. It's called the Woven City, and it's actually being built in the shadow of Mount Fuji there. They just broke ground this year, and it's going to be a 175-acre site dedicated to studying autonomous vehicles, innovative street design, smart home technology, robotics, and new mobility products. And the key thing is there'll be real people living in the city full time, and we'll study essentially what their needs are and how we can best address those needs with new technologies, new ways of thinking about mobility and transportation in the future. So at Toyota, we like to look at innovation on the small scale with Kaizen improvements every day. But of course, we're always looking to the future, and that's part of what that Woven City initiative is about.
Great,
thank you
so much. Pam.
This is a tough crowd to follow. I'm not curing childhood cancer nor building a new city. So with that, I'm a little bit feeling like I shouldn't be here. I was invited by accident. But our innovation is pretty simple. I'm at Navy Federal Credit Union. We're the largest credit union in the world. We have 11 million members. We proudly serve veterans, active duty, and all of their families and meet their banking needs. And we really, our tagline is our members are the mission. And truthfully, one of the things that I think is true for all of us here is we always talk about a member because you have to join before you can do anything. And for you guys, it's probably customers, but we're all customer driven and obsessed. And, kind of you might want to think about it, at least I like to think about it as friendly stalking, because our innovation is really about how do we know our members and how do we serve them? And we really do that against three pillars: know me, show me what's next and do it for me. And then we really try to look at how we can get to know our members and intervene in their lives at the right time. I did not hear what Michael was going to say beforehand, but I felt like it was one of those, he was looking at my notes, and that just like he looked back to his grandmother during pandemic, we had to go back and look at some customer and member segmentation we had done to make sure our messaging was correct. We had a very robust segmentation study, put our members in about 8 or 9 segments, actually 9 segments based on how they felt about their privacy, how tech savvy they were, their financial literacy, et cetera, et cetera. And the segmentation is very robust. It is fed by a lot of third-party data. We felt great about it. We're getting good responses. And then pandemic hit, and all of a sudden it didn't work anymore. And we were literally scrambling, saying, this is true for our brand. We really have to stay true and stay on top of knowing what our members need. So having an email or social post that came to you that wasn't relevant was just like a stab in the stomach. So we said, we got to fix this. And interesting enough, just like Michael looked back, we did too. We looked back in terms of when in our country have we had this much uncertainty? And it really tied back to the recession or the Spanish flu. But let's say the Spanish flu, our data is a little rough from back then. So going back to recession segments and looking at some payments, some very basic things, pivoted and really not sunset, but really took our segmentation out of our plan for the year and said, let's just hold back on this and deploy this old segmentation, if you will, trying to figure out which of our members were thriving, which were struggling. We very much felt the K economy. Some members were just greatly inconvenienced by the pandemic, and others had true economic issues. So we really tried to set up what we called, for us, it was about how might we listen loudly and listen to what people were saying and adjust along the way. So because we knew we were pivoting from this key tool of ours. Also, the other call out I want to talk about briefly is just, I don't know how many of you looked at the AI index and the measurements. One thing that really is important to me, and it's important to us relative to how we serve our members, is there was a word that showed up 3 times. And some of you were probably thinking it was about innovation. It was about technology. No, it was about cares. Cares for employees, cares for the environment, as well as customers. And we knew during the pandemic, especially, and as a service brand, we had to care first for our employees. They can't give good member service until they've had their needs met. So employees were job one, so that then they could do the right thing for our members. And then we were making sure that we were listening along the way with what they were saying and asking them questions we were getting so that we could pivot along the way to meet their needs. So the caring for us was always a three-way. The other part of that's on the AI index is about the environment. We talked less about the environment during pandemic and more about just economic necessities and help, and then also how people could come out of the pandemic stronger. And I think our listen loudly really was our point of difference for us. And pivoting back to something that had worked before and doing that rather quickly at a time when there was lots of uncertainties.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I'm going to steal that. Listen loudly. I really like that. I could use that in class, I think. And finally, Myles, love to hear your thoughts.
Hey everyone, Myles here. I work over at Netflix. I've been here. I just celebrated 5 years actually this week, so it's been an interesting and awesome ride. And I think what's so incredible for me to even witness behind the scenes is I started when Netflix was just innovative for existing. We were like in a tiny little office in Beverly Hills. I was sharing a desk with people. Like it was very much like a thing, but not the thing it is today. And I think what on a macro level, what's been so pivotal to us just being a lot of times like the first movers in this space are 2 things. I think 1, the Netflix culture as an entity, and then 2, our mission really to entertain the world, because it's our belief that great stories can come from everywhere and be loved, or anywhere and be loved everywhere. So when you think about like Squid Games, right, came from Korea and now everybody across the world is watching it. The Witcher comes from the UK and it's a massive hit. So that those 2 kind of guiding principles have been really core to how we just like even create ground for innovation across the company, which is now like 10,000 plus people. I think to talk about the culture a little bit, what's so groundbreaking there is just how quick we are and how transparent we are as a company. Basically, any level of information is available to every employee, because it's our belief that like the more you know, the more context you have, the better you can do your work, the better you can make split-second decisions, and again, move faster than our competition, and most importantly, really please our members. I think a really kind of famous, or rather more like infamous example is like the Quickster of it all, which is a really great example of like, cool, we tried this, ooh, didn't work, let's pivot and evolve and acknowledge that it failed and learn from it. And I think that is so core to Netflix. We were on a call with like our marketing team earlier this week with our CMO. We were talking about a campaign that did not work, a campaign that failed for our consumers, was quite expensive, and just didn't get the engagement that we wanted. I think what's so innovative there is like, we didn't see that as like, oh, let's put this team on blast. It was like, what didn't work, so that the other teams who are listening from Turkey can learn from it and make their campaigns better. And I think that just like culture allows us, everyone, to be really free and eager to just learn from mistakes the same way we learn from successes. And I think more granularly around specificity and how we just think about customers is that we are always trying to better understand, how do we make Netflix better as a product? How do we make better shows and films to please our members as we really seek to expand globally? Right now, we're like the largest entertainment creator and distributor in the world in 190 countries, 210 million members and growing. So we really have to think about, what does that look like for all of Netflix, but what does that look like for each specific region? So in India, for example, when we first entered that market, there was a reluctance because we were new, but also we usually require a credit card when you're signing up. And in India, there's an aversion to credit cards. So we quickly were like, oh crap, like how do we figure out how to get this audience who's interested in Netflix, but there's this bump. So our payments team reinvented how we're really thinking about gift cards. And now one of the biggest or the most used form of payment in India is gift cards. So folks will buy gift cards and then use that gift card to pay for their Netflix for their own versus actually gifting. And that's like a small example of like, let's listen to what consumers are saying and let's quickly fix that problem versus resting on something that just works for the rest of the world. And also when you think about the film industry, right? Like only a few years ago did we start making original films. I remember very clearly of like, there was like a film team on like the 5th floor and like, I don't know what they're doing, we'll see what happens. And now the entire industry is changed, right? It's like there's of course theaters to go to for some of those big box office hits, but we're having massive films here that you can watch in your living room, and both are great. And I think just that instinct of like, let's bring films kind of home to our consumers in the clearest way possible is another brilliant space of innovation. And then a few other things. I think another thing Reed, our CEO, often says is like, he just wants to he's competing with share of time with consumers. So lots of times people are like, oh, are you competing with Hulu and Amazon? And yeah, probably to an extent, but he's like, what about Fortnite? Fortnite's taking a lot of time from people, which, kids and adults the same. And I think that's evident by us entering the gaming marketplace a couple of weeks ago, where we're now creating games in the app, because our goal is like, we want to increase our touch points with consumers, increase their love for all things Netflix. And that's just another space for us to innovate against. And we're very clear of like, we just started, we are trying to learn into gaming. And Netflix is very much a place of like, let's build the plane while we're flying it, which is exhausting sometimes, but also I think breeds a lot of really great innovation. And I think the last thing I want to say is, I think going back to the culture of freedom and responsibility and hiring the best people and not micromanaging them has allowed like for my job to exist, which wasn't the job I was hired for, but then started to create it. And my role is really centered around thinking about audiences first, thinking about underrepresented folks and how to create representation internally and bring that audience to Netflix. And none of that work existed before. So I think another piece of innovation is just like the openness to hear from employees and change the way things are thought, build new teams, start new strategies. And again, not just think about like, oh, we haven't done that before. Like, I don't know. And I think really it goes down to the Netflix culture that has allowed us to just continue to test and learn and get better every year.
Great, thank you. Your comment about how you're competing for time because people are using their time differently with video games, for example, actually really tugged at my heartstrings, because at heart I am a strategy professor and we have lots of models that we teach our students. One of them is actually known as the PEST model, and that is an acronym for political, economic, social, and technological change. and how that impacts the environment, right? And clearly, if you think about what has happened during the pandemic, which is the theme of our panel here today, the pandemic has really juggled all four of these, right? Socially, we're no longer interacting in person. We now bring our work to home through a technological innovation or Zooming. There's a reason why we aren't all in the same room today. Zoom was originally a niche product. Now it's ubiquitous. Economically, we had unemployment spike to levels that we hadn't seen since the Great Depression in a month and a half. And politically, of course, we've had everything from mandates to greater tribalism, a whole bunch of different things happening on the political front. So we're going to make this a speed round and try to keep it within maybe 2 sentences or so. My question to you is, which of these 4 factors, political, economic, social, or technological, altered your business model the most during this pandemic? Pam, I go to you.
Economic. And that had to do with the K economy. Our members that were doing well and just home, inconvenience, but making more, spending less, saving, so they were kind of in the bonus round, if you will. And then on the other half, we had members that had lost jobs and were dealing with illness and had severe economic issues like food instability. So for us, it truly was a real bifurcation of the member base and how we could swing to reach both. So economics were really a big part of it.
Great. So we have an E now. Okay. Next, Myles. Which of those 4? P-E-S-T.
The S, actually. I think probably the perception is that Netflix is very high tech, and we obviously did quite well during the pandemic because you're stuck at home. What are you going to do? You're going to watch one of your streaming providers. But on the back end, so many of those decisions and those content deals and those shows and films are done when people are together in a room and writing and greenlighting and all of that. So we had to create other models that still allow that to progress without physically being with each other. And even the marketing teams, which is what I'm on, we're so conditioned with that personal relationship. How are we brainstorming in a room? Oh, we have a team in London, we should fly and meet them in person so we can build that physical relationship. That's just where Netflix has always been. So for us, it was a very social shock to change that.
Great. So now we have an E and an S. We'll go to Brian. Which of those 4? P-E-S-T.
I think I would also say S in relation to our dealer partners, which we have over 1,500 in the US. During the pandemic, they had to find a new way to sell and deliver vehicles since it was not possible to do it in person. So we've kind of been pushing them, and we have been these many years, to have a more seamless online purchase process. And I think that's just accelerated during the pandemic. And obviously it's not going to go back. And it's something that we have to adapt to as a manufacturer, but also certainly on the retail level.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you. And finally, Buffy.
I'm also going to select S. With Aflac being a very face-to-face business, we definitely had to pivot, and that carried over into our corporate social responsibility as well. One of the things the pandemic really brought to light was just the health and equity. And so that's one of the reasons we decided to kind of take that My Special Aflac duck that was designed for children with cancer and expand that to include a disease like sickle cell. So yeah, S for me as well.
Well, great. That's amazing. And it sounds like at the business school, we should be encouraging our students to take sociology classes as well as economics classes, because 3 innovative firms here saying S, 1 saying economics. And it was really wonderful having you all here today for this panel. I'm now going to turn it back over. Once again, congratulations, and thanks so much for participating today.
With all of the in-house production that they have with Netflix originals and Netflix films, and not just having content from other production agencies on their platform. And I feel like they're constantly trying to come up with really, really good content, which is really innovative for the entertainment industry.
Aflac emphasizes social innovation and equity for all. For example, 48% of all new hires were ethnic minorities.
One of the more innovative things that they've done is cut down on the amount of physical locations that they have and maintain, and pushed more and more services into a very well-run, streamlined application. And I think that's something that a lot of banks do.